Hello, good evening and welcome to News at 10 here on TV3 with me, Martin, Asiedu-Dartey. Coming up, the major highlights for today. The Galamsey issue appears not to be letting up anytime soon, as two bodies have been reportedly retrieved from a Galamsey pit at Petransa in the Asante-Achim Central Municipality in the Ashanti region. The illegal mining pit on Monday caved in, killing small-scale miners who were working underground at the time. Businessman Alfred Agbeshi-Woyome has told the Supreme Court that he finds it difficult to understand why he has to be orally examined while he has an agreement with the state on payment terms of the 51.2 million Ghana cedis he owes. Godfrey Tanam, TV3 reporter, indicates that he has been ordered to furnish the court with the property number of the house he lives in, which he claims does not belong to him but his younger brother. The Civil and Local Government Staff Association, CLOGSAG, has petitioned the Industrial and Labour Court to restrain the Finance Minister from interfering in the payroll issues. Executive Secretary of the association, Isaac Bampoado, says Ken Oforiatta, who is the Finance Minister, is attempting to reintroduce the eSwitch payment system, which they are not happy about. Now, former President John Dramani Mahama has reiterated the need for Ghanaians to remember what Professor John Evans Atta Mills stood for as they celebrate him 5 years after he passed away. He is disappointed Ghana remains torn apart by party differences, which Professor Mills tried to prevent. So those are the major highlights from today. Let's now settle down for the big one. Thank you very much for staying with us. Let's go straight to the issues surrounding the Electoral Commission now. And Chairman of the National Peace Council, Most Reverend Professor Emmanuel Asante, says that constitutionally mandated bodies should be allowed to investigate allegations made against the Electoral Commission chair by concerned staff. According to the Peace Council chair, this must be done with expedition as the credibility of the commission is at stake. He spoke with TV3's Media General News Bureau Chief in the Northern Sector, Kofi Edudomfe.
Without a very sound electoral commission that is so united and committed to the work that has been assigned to them, our democracy will be shaky. So as far as I'm concerned, what is happening at EC at the moment must be a worry to any concerned citizen of this country.
One of the issues being talked about now has to do with whom should we be believing, whether the commissioner herself or her other commissioners. How do we weave into this whole issue with the hope of getting a solution?
I think it's not a question of believing any party. Accusations and counter-accusations have come. And we have, the due process. The due process, I'm told that Yoko is already investigating some part of it. Petition have been sent to Nana Addo, who is the president of the nation, His Excellency. The due process is that if he thinks that it merits anything at all, he's going to push it to the Chief Justice, who will in turn look at the prima facie aspect of it. If he establishes that, then due process will have to go on. So as far as I'm concerned, we should not commit ourselves to media trial on this issue, because, these are allegations. We do not have the facts. And therefore, we should allow the bodies that have been instituted to work on these things of this nature to do their work. And one would hope that these bodies would also do the work that has been assigned to them with expedition. I mean, so that, you know, as a nation, we will have the peace of mind. Because if your electoral commission is in trouble, it's in this shape, your democracy is also in a bad shape.
And one will also say that in as much as we're supposed to allow the due processes to be followed, at the end of it all, the whole commission itself would have been bruised one way or the other at the end of the session. Should we pursue the thought that all commissioners should excuse themselves from their positions and allow fresh air at the commission?
It depends upon what we mean by fresh air. We also need a basis. Are we going to simply bring in new people who have had no experience at all? I would think that, you know, we will have to look into the matter. Depending upon the outcome of it, others may have to recuse themselves from the whole thing. If it is established that nothing is found against them, there is nothing wrong with that, they continue with their work. If there is the need for other people to be taken out, then we go through that process. I'm concerned not about individuals really. I'm concerned about the institution itself, which is a very viable institution in our political democracy.
And for our political actors, most especially the NPP, the NDC, how do we ensure, as you're saying, the integrity of the commission does not end up being bastardized with these ongoing accusations?
I think the political parties, especially the two major parties who have had the privilege of governing this country, the NDC and NPP, should be very circumspect in the kinds of things they say about this issue. There's no reason why we should politicize this. I mean, by politicizing it, I mean partisan politics. You know, counter accusations, NDC accusing NPP, NPP responding and also accusing NDC. The moment you do that, you have really created a situation where the institution itself is bastardized, is unduly politicized, and, you know, confidence in that institution is eroded.
We are staying on that subject a while longer. We've been joined via Skype by Kwakweja Emisa Abraham. He is a policy analyst and a lecturer at the University of Cape Coast to really find out what else can be done, considering the fact that the cracks seem to have deepened within the top echelons of the Electoral Commission. Good evening, sir. Thank you very much for joining us.
Good evening. Thank you, too.
Let's start from the fact that clearly it is obvious that there seem to be major disagreements between the very top leadership of the Electoral Commission. Do you ever foresee that no matter how this issue is resolved, they can come together and work, you know, as a team? Is that possible?
Thank you very much. Yes, of course. It is possible for the commissioners to come together after everything is resolved. Looking at the pedigree and the kind of work that they have done, we expect them to. I mean, they are supposed to put aside their personal differences and come together and work for the good of the country.
But there lies the challenge. There lies the challenge. The difference between the supposed to, which is their mandate, and then the ability to. You know, we know that you've been employed to do A, B, and C, but then looking at what has happened, can they really put it aside and work as colleagues? Is that possible?
Of course, it is possible. We shouldn't create the impression as if these cracks started just 2 weeks ago. These cracks were there. The very first day that the commissioner set her foot at the place. And because if you read the petitions and the counter accusations and all that, you realize that this cracks has been there for quite a long time. That is before the 2016 elections. And of course, we saw how the elections went. We saw how it was organized. I mean, we didn't have any major incident that tainted the reputation of the results that came out. So it is expected that if everything is resolved and these commissioners are to sit and resolve their differences, they should be able to work. And I believe that they will be able to work. But the problem lies in what kind of resolution are we talking about? Because as of now, we are all looking at the constitutional means of resolving it. And if it is resolved constitutionally, then we can say that, yes, they will be able to come together. But if we leave them to go the way that they are going, throwing words about threatening court actions against themselves, personal court actions against themselves, what it means is that then the cracks are going to be deeper and deeper, because the accusations, the name callings and the counter accusations will never stop.
Many have asked for the due process to take its course, where we would allow the president to ask the Chief Justice to go through. Everything is laid down. We know what is expected constitutionally. But whereas we are looking at that, what can be done internally within the corridors of the Electoral Commission? What can they, the leadership themselves, do to iron out their differences while we wait for probably what would come out from the findings of the CJ?
Well, we Ghanaians see them as matured professionals who are supposed to approach their work professionally. And I believe that there are internal resolution mechanisms within the EC that should have been activated. And so we expect that much as these things go on, the internal resolution mechanisms will be activated in order for an internal resolution to take place. And of course, these internal resolutions cannot take place among the commissioners. We have to be certain about that. They can take place from the grassroots, that is from the directors, because you realize that the commissioners are being followed by their directors. So it can evolve from the directorship basis for it to reach the basis of the commissioners.
We're all awaiting what would come out of the due process that has already started, because government or the presidency has acknowledged receipt of the petition. As that may be, and while we wait for that, how do you think that then as a nation we can manage the issue so the commentary in the public domain does not seem to further injure the damage that has been caused by these comments from within?
First of all, I think the commissioners should keep mute. They should stop talking. They should stop writing. They should stop putting more words out there, more emotive words. And most of these words that are coming out are more emotive. And so they do not actually strike the core of getting us to the bottom of whatever is happening. They don't give us facts. They are emotive words. And again, the media should also look at how they report some of these things, because you realize that people have taken things on social media and other blogs, writing their opinions, and sometimes it is more about tilting towards the politics of it rather than the substance and the facts of it. Right. And so when these things when these things are addressed, you see that the whole issue will be sanitized, and whatever will come out will be something that all of us will accept, that indeed it is a consensual resolution.
That actually dovetails into my next question, which has to do with the fact that portions of the commentary from within seem to have bothered on the political aspect, where the two major parties, the NPP and NDC, seem to have jumped onto the bandwagon and driving the entire discussion away from the substance, the meat of it. How can we treat this devoid of politics? And can we really do that? We can do that.
Just that if you read the petition and the response by Madam Charlotte Osei, you realize that, of course, NPP was mentioned, and the transfer of agents of the EC who were perceived to be NPP men. I mean, these are allegations that were being, put across, and these two political parties held on to it. But you realize that some of the comments by these political parties were too early. Some were of the impression that it is more political than internal wranglings, and someone had a hand in it, and all that. All these things were too early. Now we are seeing that it is actually a problem between the commission, between those who are supposed to be in charge of our elections. And so, of course, since the work of the EC hovers around political parties, it will be very difficult to discuss this issue outside of the politics. But what we can do is that we can all trust in the processes at resolution and say that these processes does not have that seemingly negative political hand in it, and that these processes are processes that we all trust in because they are coming from an institution that has been given the power by the Constitution to resolve some of these issues.
So some are calling, and this is my final question, some are calling for a total overhaul of the electoral process or the electoral leadership, and saying that we should scrap it and get a new team in place. Constitutionally, there are processes we need to go through, but do you think that is even a feasible call to consider?
I do think so. I do think it can be considered. However, it has to be done through the processes, because as we all know, the chairman of the EC has the same position as a judge in the Court of Appeal, and the deputies as High Court judges, and so they will all have to go through a certain processes. But the overhaul does not necessarily mean everybody must resign. Otherwise, if everybody resigns, who are we going to bring there? Are we going to bring totally new people? And this is one of the problems that I think has accounted for some of these things. Some of us were of the impression that certain positions must be looked at internally. For instance, if you are choosing someone like an electoral commissioner, I mean, we all know Dr. Afrejan was already in there. He took over when the electoral commissioner then went on retirement and all that. And so, first of all, some of us were looking for the opportunity that those who were already in there will be looked at first. But right. Of course, you cannot question that, since it is the prerogative of the president to choose whoever he or she thinks is competent.
Thank you. Thank you so much for your thoughts on this call. Kweja Emisa Abraham is a policy analyst and a lecturer at the University of Cape Coast. Thank you for making time to speak with us. This is still News at 10, and certainly this subject will be in media circles. Further discussions and different arms are growing from this topic, but we'll keep you posted on every new one that comes out. This is still News at 10 on TV3. We'll be back shortly with more. Thank you very much for staying with TV3. This is News at 10. Let's do more politics here. And suspended People's National Convention General Secretary Atiq Mohammed reported to work today in defiance of the order of the party's National Executive Committee, that's the NEC. The committee, after a meeting last Saturday, suspended him indefinitely for inefficiency.
As at 10:20 a.m. on Monday, all the offices at the PNC headquarters in Accra were locked up. Barely an hour later, the embattled PNC General Secretary Atiq Mohammed walked in. To him, the National Executive Committee is not clothed with the powers to suspend the General Secretary and Chairman of the party. He explained that Article 67 of the PNC Constitution states that in case of any misconduct, the officer in question would be referred to a disciplinary committee, whose findings would be approved by a standing committee.
Inefficiency, like I said, is not an offense under our constitution. And that's why I said it is only Congress that will pass that determination that you are inefficient. So they won't vote for you any longer.
He also indicated that in the case of a removal or suspension of a party official, Article 51 of PNC's amended constitution requires the support of at least 2/3 of an agenda to suspend or remove the General Secretary. Atik Mohammed, however, says the agenda for the NEC meeting was why Dr. Edward Mahama accepted the ambassador-at-large post without recourse to the party.
I am fighting to make sure that these errors that are making us look like a joke of a party in the eyes of the public are corrected.
He also argues that the National Executive Committee of the party does not have the powers to assess its performance in the last election. In the meantime, a political science lecturer at the University of Ghana, Dr. Asiedu-Dartey, has disclosed suggestions that such internal wranglings could affect the party's fortunes in 2020.
I think it's not good to have those sort of internal disunity and wranglings going on as a party that needs a lot of support and a lot of sympathy moving forward. But I still think 2020 is far away. Whatever the issue might be, 6 months after elections, they can still organize and move forward.
All right, so a group calling itself Beneficiaries of the Youth Employment Agency has threatened a demonstration to demand the immediate payment of outstanding salaries from the management of the Youth Employment Agency. But the Chief Executive Officer of the YEA, lawyer Justin Kodia, says that members of the group do not have appointment letters from the agency to be paid any salary.
The group says about 40% of its members have not received their 2 months' allowances. It also implicated management of the YEA for failing to publish names of those whose salaries have been suspended after its audit of the payroll in May this year. Its president, Patrick Bosu, is again worried that most of the modules, such as the coastal beautification model, have been halted, affecting allowances of beneficiaries.
For the EPOs, the coastal sanitations, the Arabic teachers, and the Greener Ghana. Okay, so if the contract has not yet expired, why do you terminate it?
However, Chief Executive Officer of the YEA, lawyer Justin Kodia, says those models are being reviewed.
There is no coordination about those who are doing those models. Who do they report? What are those reports used for? At the end of the day, we must be mindful that we are using public money. So management has not taken a firm decision. We gave a hint. But right now we are reviewing and assessing it so that by the end of the month, whatever decision that management will take, we'll communicate it to them.
Leadership of the group has threatened a demonstration on Tuesday, July 25, if its allowances are not paid.
We're paying 2 months, others 1 month. Meanwhile, you are owing some for 1 year, others 6 months. Me, myself, 6 months now, I've never taken any allowances before.
But lawyer Justin Kodia says he is not perturbed. He indicates those affected would be paid at the end of this month.
Instead of them visiting their district to find out the reason why some of them did not receive their allowance. And see, let us be frank. We know youth employment agents. Some people were recruited into several models and they have been staying in their homes without working, but every month they draw their allowance. So in trying to sanitize the system, certainly certain people will not be happy.
Currently, management of the YEA has introduced a timesheet to ensure only beneficiaries at post receive their salaries.
Now, this is a rather interesting story. So hundreds of tertiary graduates were left with no option but to push and shove their way through this year's National Service Placement Registration exercise. Now, the first day of the exercise was fraught with confusion as security personnel were called in to keep some control and sanitation and bring some sanity to the place. TV3's Solis Roscote was there and has come through with this report.
It's the first day of the placement registration exercise at the regional office of the National Service Secretariat. The exercise had come to a complete standstill barely 2 hours after it had begun. These tents had been mounted for registrants. More metal barricades had to be brought in to make way around the registration tents. Several calls by the officials for the crowd to move back appeared to have fallen on deaf ears. Frustration and disappointment were registered on the faces of many. The situation got so bad that some could not take it anymore.
Now, you'll be probably shocked to realize that they are doing something very simple. This is why they are here. The registration number at the top. The queue is just for the officials to write this on your form.
Some distressed graduates spoke to the news team.
We are suffering. Some were collapsing. I have a friend who collapsed here this morning, a guy. So what will a lady do?
I wish the government would help by doing something about it. At least there can be an online registration process, or if it would be in badges. I and my friends, for example, we had to sleep the whole night here.
The registration for the 2016-2017 placement year is slated from July 24 to August 24.
As they say, I can't think far. People who are willing to serve the nation have to go through this. So maybe the National Service Secretariat need to do more, up their game in terms of the registration process, so we don't have this recurring. Because over the years, this seemed to be the same story. Every year registration has to take place. So at least we'll get their view on this in our subsequent bulletins, hopefully. Let's stay on labor-related issues, because the Civil and Local Government Staff Association, CLOGSAG, has petitioned the Industrial and Labor Court to restrain the Finance Minister from interfering in payroll issues. The Executive Secretary of the association, Isaac Bampoado, says Ken Oforiatta is attempting to reintroduce the e-switch payment system, which they think is bad and are not happy about.
The Executive Secretary, Isaac Bampoado, recalls the resistance of the association to stop the e-switch payment system in 2016. He indicates the association has guarded the Minister of Finance is attempting to reintroduce the e-switch payment system again. CLOGSAG also alluded that the Minister of Finance is again interfering in payroll matters, which have affected some of his staff. The Executive Secretary has since proceeded to court to secure an injunction to halt such interferences by the Finance Minister.
I'm also not happy about the way the Minister for Finance is trying to push e-switch down our throats. We have an agreement with our employer. We've designated our banks where our salary should go, and that's it. What has this got to do with our payroll? If you are having issues with our payroll, we must solve it. Well, what has that got to do with SNAIT's biometric registration?
CLOGSAG wants the Finance Minister to work with the head of local government and office of the head of civil service on payroll matters.
Issues relating to human resource, personnel matters, is these services, not Ministry of Finance. Ministry of Finance is for finance. They should concentrate on their responsibility. They should be in their lane.
Ruling on the matter has been scheduled for October this year.
All right, so that's how we bring the bulletin to a close. Thank you very much for watching. My name is Martin Asiedu-Dartey. There is more news on our website, 3news.com. Do visit and get updated. Have a fantastic evening. Bye for now.